Hello and welcome. My name is Amanda Granger. I'm the Director of Community Engagement at the WNET Group, home of Channel 13, America's flagship PBS station in New York City. On behalf of everyone at the WNET Group, I want to thank you for joining us for Grace Under Pressure, Town Halls on Mental Health. Each week, we will examine mental health from the perspectives of 5 groups that help define American society: healthcare workers, K-12 teachers, mental health providers, activists, and journalists. The summit will present frank talk about issues and solutions with an understanding of history and eyes toward the future. Grace Under Pressure is live streaming every Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern from April 28th to May 26th. You can learn more at 13.org/graceunderpressure. Tonight's program, Lesson Learned, a town hall with K-12 teachers about mental health, is presented by the WNET Group and Chasing the Dream, our national multi-platform reporting initiative that explores inequality, opportunity, and justice in America. You can watch the programs produced by this initiative at pbs.org/chasingthedream or at youtube.com/chasingthedreampbs. Please subscribe. Part of our station's mission is to provide meaningful experiences to our audiences and communities, to educate, entertain, and inspire. By bringing together leaders who are at the front lines in bringing about systemic change, we hope Grace Under Pressure will provide new perspectives and ideas that will be helpful to all of us in strengthening mental health in our own lives and communities. We will have time for an audience Q&A towards the end, so as you watch the live stream, please post your questions in the comments section. We hope you'll join us again next Thursday for the next program in this series, Taking Time to Breathe, a town hall with mental health providers about mental health. Again, you can learn more at 13.org/graceunderpressure. You can also watch last week's program at that link. I'd like to thank our promotional partners for Grace Under Pressure. We are so grateful for the support of the Asian American Federation and the National Alliance on Mental Illness of New York City, or NAMI NYC. Thank you also to our ASL interpreters for tonight, Tracy Winters and Wanye Jefferson. And last, a very special thanks to WNET's 400 plus community partners from across sectors and across communities throughout the 5 boroughs. Their input has shaped and inspired our thinking around this topic and many others. A quick reminder that the views expressed by tonight's guests and attendees are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views of the WNET Group. And now I'm pleased to introduce WNET's Director of Community Partnerships and the Curator of Grace Under Pressure, Brian Tate.
Thank you so much, Amanda, and greetings, everyone. I want to begin by acknowledging and paying deep respect to the Lenape people, upon whose unceded and ancestral homeland lies the city we call Manhattan. Please join me in making this affirmation in a spirit of humility and solidarity with an ongoing commitment to decolonization and racial justice. I want to also acknowledge the continuity between our being here today and the collective struggle for liberation and the full expression of our humanity that has transcended generations. Countless lives have been lost in this struggle, and we hold all those people close. We honor them, and we are thankful for their lives. We honor them every time we gather across communities to speak truth. I'd like to now thank all of you for joining us for week 2 of Grace Under Pressure, Town Halls on Mental Health. Last week, we held a powerful conversation with healthcare workers, and we're excited for tonight's event. At the start of each town hall, we will present a short performance by a gifted musician or spoken word artist whose work reminds us why we have gathered in this virtual space to discuss these tough issues, and it's for the culture. We're thrilled to have with us tonight someone very special to kick off this forum. Please join me in welcoming multimedia visual artist, composer, musician, and my friend, Paul Rucker.
Hello, thank you very much, Brian. Appreciate it.
Paul, it's great to see you.
Glad to have you
here.
Thank you.
And where are you right now?
I'm in Richmond, Virginia, a few blocks away from the former Black Wall Street.
Got it. Thank you. And what will you be performing for us tonight?
I was thinking I asked someone earlier to give me a number, and they gave me the number 6. So 6 is actually my favorite teacher from 6th grade, Miss Patterson. So I'm going to play a piece for her, and I'm going to use a motive of 6 notes, 2 triplets, successive triplets, and I asked for a letter as well. And she gave me H before I could tell her that H is not in the musical alphabet. So I used a Bach sequence, so I made H B. So I'm going to play something in B, and with the motive of 6/8. And I want to dedicate it to my teacher, Miss Patterson, and all those teachers that are taking on the most difficult, most challenging, and rewarding job that we can probably think of.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Paul. Looking forward. Please
Thank
take
you.
it away.
Thank you.
Paul, thank you so much, man. That was beautiful.
Thank you.
Gosh. Do you have a name for that piece?
I just wrote it for this event here and for you, and just for you.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you, man. Thank you. Everyone, if you were as moved by Paul's music as we were, you can learn more about it and his incredible multidisciplinary work at his website, paulrucker.com. And we'll drop that into the chat, paulrucker.com. Please join me now in welcoming tonight's incredible panel for Lesson Learned, a town hall with K through 12 teachers about mental health. You can find everyone's bios at our website, 13.org/graceunderpressure. And the link to the bios will also be in the chats at your YouTube and Facebook pages. And remember that the panel would like to hear from you as well. So please post your own questions into that same chat. Without further ado, please join me in welcoming our moderator, my friend, Dr. Debbie Almontaser, CEO and founder, Bridging Cultures Group, Inc., author, Leading While Muslim, The Experiences of American Muslim Principles After 9/11, and founding principal, Khalil Gibran International Academy. Dr. Debbie, it's always great to see you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And our panelists. First is Lisa Casey of the Winnebago Tribe, student support specialist, Sioux City Community School District at North High School in Iowa. Lisa, wonderful to have you here.
Thank you. Wonderful to be here.
Benjamin Goria, band and music teacher, San Gabriel High School in California. Ben?
Thanks for having me. I'm so glad to be here.
Gia Lee, special education teacher, M364, the Earth School here in New York City. Gia?
Thank you so much. Nice to be here.
Dania Manderson, English teacher, Mott Hall Community School, also in New York, in the Boogie Down Bronx. Dania, it's great to have you here.
Very happy to be here with all of you, and thanks to all our guests.
And Sylvia Sheikh, math teacher at the Mariner High School in Everett, Washington. Sylvia?
Thank you. It's an honor to be here.
Thank you all so much for joining with us tonight. And we're looking forward to a great conversation. I'm going to leave you now. Dr. Debbie, leave it in your capable hands. And remember that we'll be taking questions from the audience. So please post your questions in the chat. Dr. Debbie?
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Brian. And welcome to all of our viewers. We're so delighted to have you here and to be a part of this very important series that is talking about issues that we as a nation don't spend enough time to talk about. Mental health, the mental health of all Americans and what that is like for us as a nation. You know, there have been studies that have shown that 1 in every 5 Americans actually has mental health illness in some shape, way, or form. And so it is imperative for us as a nation to have these kinds of conversations in particularly, places of different professions. So last week it was, one community, and this evening it's actually educators. And so I'm really honored and privileged to be here with all of these distinguished educators, not just from New York City, but nationally, who really are the role models. They are the trailblazers. They are the people that are there for our children. They are the parents from 8 to 3 p.m. of our children. They are the caretakers. They are the mommies. They are the daddies when our children are left in our school system to be cared for. And so it is truly an honor and a privilege to be here with all of you. And I pay you homage. We just recently had National Teacher Week. And so it's important to celebrate you, not just in 1 week or 1 month, but to celebrate you every day, because you are, tireless servants, forging and building the next generation of leaders. And sadly, our profession does not get the due credit that it should. And so I want you to know that tonight, we are giving you that opportunity to know that you are celebrated, that you are honored, and all of your selflessness in this, important career is well appreciated. And so given that we have just spent the last 2.5 years of our lives through a pandemic, we've worked remotely, we've worked hybrid, a variety of ways that we've actually had to be chameleons and change our shape and be, really creative and be, changing with the times and changing with everything that has been happening, to us as a nation in order to give our children some normalcy. What we've experienced as a nation, as a global community, required so much of us to be able to show up every day for our children with a smile, even though that days we have woken up feeling broken and feeling like we just can't even walk through the door or get onto that Zoom meeting because of what we personally as individuals have experienced. So I appreciate you all. And I want to start off by simply sharing with you one of the things that, recently was released was a survey by the National Association, which found that 55% of educators said they are thinking of leaving the field. As we delve into this conversation tonight, I'd love for you all to keep that in the back of your mind and think about why our fellow educators thinking about this. What are the issues? What are the concerns? What is making them feel, to leave a profession that is so rewarding when we are, with children day in and day out. So to start our conversation, this is going to go to Lisa and Ben. I would love for you to basically, share with us, what does work and life balance mean for a K through 12 teacher? Lisa, would you start us off?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that question?
Sure. What does work and life balance mean for a K through 12 teacher?
Okay. Well, work and life balance. Well, it is hard. I believe that in these times that we're working through the pandemic, we find it harder not only for us, but for our students, for our teachers, for our staff, even administrators. So it is kind of unprecedented times. So we just really, from day to day, you don't know what you're walking into.
Thank you. And Ben?
I think it's a bit different for all of us because while we're teachers, we share that. So we have the work part that's kind of the same, but the home life, I think, is it's different for everyone. And it's changed for me personally since I've started teaching. I started teaching and I didn't have a family. I got married, I had children, and now it's much different home life. And it is more challenging. There were challenges with each stage of my personal life. And when the pandemic took place, all of those challenges were just made so much more intense. So what is the balance? I think it really is different for everyone, but I think that there's a line separating work from life is a key thing. And especially when we were teaching remotely, it was very hard to distinguish work from life. Work was all hours for me last year, and it's nice to be back in person.
Thank you. I totally agree with you on that. I remember, spending days from, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., sometimes not realizing I needed to take a break and go have dinner or go have lunch or have a snack. So I can certainly relate to that. So Bia and Gia, I would love for you to share with us, how has the COVID-19 pandemic affected the psychological and physical health of teachers? So Bia, would you like to kick us off?
Sure. How has the pandemic affected our physical and psychological health? this pandemic has exacerbated the issue that we were already dealing in education. Our students are struggling, our educators are struggling, we're in survival mode. A lot of us are trying to make it, through the year. We're in May, so a lot of us are counting down days. And, it started with, we were really overwhelmed, especially at the beginning of the year. We came in with staffing shortages. We came in with trying to figure out how to reimagine school again after, students not being in the classroom for 2 years. And that was a lot of struggle with our schedules. And you just talked about, work and life balance. And it was hard to manage that work and life balance. Right now we're burnt out, we're stressed out. A lot of educators are taking time on leave or sabbatical leave. We've had educators leave in the middle of the school year because we are so emotionally exhausted, and her counselors are being asked to sub, leaving them with a higher caseload and the workload. So right now we're just, surviving through the year.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you, Sophia. Gia, I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, I would totally echo everything that Sophia just said and add on that in the midst of all of this, if you've heard of shock doctrine, right? The initial hit back in March of 2020 when things were starting to really shut down, and we were literally in a position to have to build airplanes while flying it, getting instructional, modules ready suddenly virtually. We were just on go on adrenaline, I think, also trying to manage our own, home lives and our own families. But so psychologically, I think that we're very strong, resilient people. We're nurturers. So that went into hyperdrive. And then we had to remind ourselves to take care of ourselves and each other. And I think in the spaces where educators, like in a school like mine, where educators work together to organize around issues to try to make things easier, support each other, where we really worked in our own school communities to communicate with families and our students to check in, there was a greater sense of support. I don't know that in this very individualistic society that existed everywhere. And that's a concern. But I know that it's varied, but we are on survival mode, like Sophia said.
Thank you. It truly was a challenge and continues to be a challenge. And, Sophia, you're all the way in Washington State, and everything that you're saying is actually happening right here in New York City. So what we are seeing are actually national trends that are affecting educators across the country. So thank you for pointing that out. Danea and Ben, after more than a year of remote education and the growing reliance on screens across society, what roles does technology play in the mental health of teachers and students? Danea, why don't you please kick us off?
Thank you. So when we think about mental health, well, and the role of, you're asking about the role of technology. Let me just reread the question when it comes up to make sure that I have it. But what I found is that students needed to understand that they too need to disconnect from the technology. A lot of technology is really good because it's a way for students to explore the world without actually being out there in the physical sense. But we also I'm finding that I have to teach them how to rein it in a little bit, how to decrease their screen time. Sorry, the question didn't come up again. We had to teach them how to use it responsibly also. They're citizens, right? They're global citizens, and they have to understand that now with the world at their fingertips, how do they make sure that they're not getting into the wrong kinds of information? Yes, and when we tie that into mental health, again, if you're having a constant influx of information and stimuli, right? That's not necessarily healthy for students because they're not able to sift through the information as quickly or as thoroughly as we can, and that can lead to a lot of misinformation. And I think that's the danger of having this growing reliance on the technology. It's how to keep students safe and to have them be able to critically sift through that information.
Thank you. And Ben, would love to hear from you.
I agree with Dania. I think that sifting through information is just an incredible challenge, especially with what we see in the world happening with information. There's all kinds of information, and much of it is inaccurate, purposefully or unintentionally. I teach at a high school level, though, and my students, so many of them were on their phones, and that was during the remote learning. And that was the only way they could connect with each other. So that was their entire world. So while I'd love for them to get outside, I'd love for them to put their phones down, I think that that's the world that they've become accustomed to, and it needs to be a gentle transition. In my own classes, I try to incorporate their technology in an effective and useful way for what we're doing, but that's hard as well. When there's problems with technology in the classroom, and I know all teachers are dealing with that, rather than having some hard rules, I found that having conversations with students, that's kind of the way to go for me, at least. But the role of tech, I think, is going to continue to change. Right now, it's front and center, and I think that the best thing that teachers can do is learn to use it effectively.
Thank you, Ben. You know, it's so interesting as both of you were talking, and it made me go back to a picture that I had seen a couple of years ago before the pandemic, and it was actually in a magazine of a family, an entire family of maybe about 10 or 12 people that came together for a holiday, and each and every person in that family was sitting in a living room. They weren't talking to one another. They were all looking at their phones. And that picture alarmed me. It alarmed me that a family was together for the holidays, but yet so disconnected, so close, but so disconnected. And then the pandemic hit, right?
Were they really not talking to each other, or were they using those devices to communicate instead of speaking out loud? And I always see that because I know that my students are communicating to each other with their devices in class. But it is awkward for sure. Absolutely.
And that's one thing also that we're seeing a lot of teachers, you know, in the work that I do as a diversity, equity, and inclusion trainer and working with schools is right now, many teachers are working to teach children social norming again, what it means to raise your hand, what kind of classroom voice to use, and all of these things after being, you know, almost 2 years in remote learning. So it's really fascinating. Lisa and Sobia, if there was one thing you'd like parents to know about the mental health of teachers and students, what would it be? Lisa, can you start us off?
Yes. Thank you. Well, it would be that when you send your child to school, we are doing the best we can with your child. So we don't always know what happens at home or what happens, because I work in the high school setting too, what happens at their workplace or what happens with their friends, and social media and all these things that could be troubling them. We don't always know those things, but when it does come to our attention, we do the best that we can to provide support for them. So if it's a bullying issue, a lot of that, going back to the phones, we do see that with the different social media platforms on there. So once they bring that to our attention, we do some investigating and parent contacts with that. Also, we do help with we have counseling services at our school. So if they're having a hard time at home, or need someone to talk to, we have our school counselors there. But we also have mental health counselors that come into our school. So we do the best that we can to take care of that part of the student as well, because a lot of times education is not at the forefront of the student's mind.
Thank you. Sobia?
Yeah, just to thank you, Lisa. Just to add on to what Lisa said, when students come into our classrooms, we're doing the best that we can to support in any way that we can, whether that's in our classroom or in the school building. Like Lisa said, we offer counseling services and other mental health services that students may need. But recognize that we also need your support. Understand that communication for us, it takes time to get back to you. Talk to your child about school and what's going on in classrooms, and if you have concerns, communicate those with us. Email us or check on their work, what's going on in the classroom. Often we hear from parents, oh, my kid said we don't have homework, and I'm like, that's not true. So communicate with us, and I'd be happy to do a Zoom with you, communicate the needs in ways that your child has these strengths and what their needs are. But we also recognize that, know that a lot of attacks that we are currently experiencing are taking a toll on us. So we need your support. I know we see your support on social medias, and you're like, we love our educators, but we need you to be talking to our school boards. We need you to go and talk to our legislators. Stand with us in our fight, whether that's, staffing shortages or curriculum or respect. We need your support.
Thank you, Sobia. That is such an important point that you made. And, one of the things that I think is really important for parents to understand is many educators are also parents. And they have their own children, and they have their own issues that they have to deal with in terms of making sure that their children are fed, that their children are, doing their remote learning, that they're engaged, that they're safe. So it's so important to do that and understand that sometimes when we as educators don't show up, there's something in our life that's happened. An example of that is, my daughter-in-law, my grandson is autistic. And when his school shut down because there was a COVID case, she had no other option but to be home with him. And of course, parents were not understanding when they first didn't understand why she kept taking days off at a time. And then once she communicated that with them, they were very empathetic and understanding and knowing what it's like, to be in that kind of position. So I think it's also sometimes really important for us, as educators, to share that part of our lives, that we're also human too, and have these kinds of issues that may come up in our own lives. Gia and Dainea, what are some of the older pre-pandemic issues within school systems that affect the mental well-being of teachers and students? Gia, can you kick us off?
Sure. If anything, the pandemic highlighted the very systemic and historic inequities that have been around for a really long time. We faced, ed privatization, where everything was very test-driven. The Fiscal Policy Institute issued a report, I think it was in 2019, saying that New York State, where I live, led the nation in income inequity. Income inequity affects the majority of the students in our public school system. They are housing insecure, food insecure, and we are dealing with these societal issues within the school system. On top of that, very, very harsh accountability systems were in place that we were organizing against in New York City as well. Ed privatization is a real thing that's been around for almost 20 years now, and that has had a real toll, and the pandemic really lay bare just the effects.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you. I think one of the things, and the points that were just made were very, very, very key points. I think we also, what I'm seeing is still even more of a deficit within what students are able to do, their skills and how they're able to approach the academic side of learning. And that's still a problem within the school system. I think it's affecting the teachers because we're having to find a lot more ways to address these learning gaps that are there. And it's very difficult because there's so many resources now, but there's not enough time to kind of go through the resources to match it to the demographic of students that you have. And that's a problem that's been happening forever. I think the way in which we handle classroom size is still a problem. That hasn't changed at all. So now we have students with bigger learning gaps and we still have the same class size. That was problematic from before. So it's even harder now to really devote a lot of the attention to the children that they really do need. Legislative wise, I think those things are, they're embedded kind of in our social culture. Mm-hmm. But I think when I talk about education, I like to think about the students and how they're not being serviced in the way that they should. And we're talking about students with disabilities, students who are ESLs, students who are disadvantaged in different ways. There's just those longstanding issues have not yet been corrected and addressed.
Absolutely. And, as both of you were talking and I was thinking about it, one of the biggest issues that we have seen is here we are 2.5 years later because of the pandemic and remote learning. We have so many children that are at least 6 months to 1.5 years, behind on grade levels. And so, it was already bad enough prior to the pandemic. And now, I'm seeing this trend right now where some of the schools are actually thinking about holding children back. And we're saying, how could you do that? Well, we just came back to physical learning. You can't make, that kind of drastic decision without, assessment, without understanding what we've all just gone through. And so it's really an unfortunate situation that we've been dealt with as educators. Ben and Sylvia, there is a seemingly endless cycle of news stories and viral videos about traumatizing events happening locally, nationally, and internationally. How are students processing those events? How are they doing? And so Ben, if you can start us off.
I think this is a good question to follow the last one. I think students and teachers have really learned the past couple of years that an important skill is processing your emotions and kind of transforming the negative emotions that you have into emotions that are useful for your environment. And I think that relates to the systems thing that you were mentioning earlier, because everything that we measure in schools is declarative knowledge or academic skill. So these emotional skills, everything we do is in an emotional space. So you can't do anything that we're supposed to do in school if you don't have those emotional tools. So I think that my biggest concern is that many of our students are learning resignation. They're learning to live with frustration.
Thank you, Ben. I know this is so hard. It's such a hard topic to discuss and really, develop a better understanding of where we are as a nation, where we are as a world. Sylvia?
Before I answer that question, I just want to jump into the last question you asked earlier. And I know Ben said, hey, it's a great, tie-in. I know we focus a lot on classroom educators, But we're not really discussing, the non-classroom educators, our counselors and our subs and their bus drivers. Right now, or earlier I mentioned about how our counselors are covering classes. Just to give you an idea, my school has 5 counselors, and right now there are 5 counselors for 2,500 kids. Every day they are asked to sub, and right now they're proctoring for AP exams in the morning and subbing later, then coming back to like a really large number of caseload while working on their own certification requirements. And just, that's taking a toll on them and their own students because, they're not able to give the time to their students when they need them. As far as how are the international and national events that are occurring traumatizing, kids are watching what's happening, but they also know that they're also watching the adults and how the adults are reacting to these events. And if they notice that the adults aren't speaking up or fighting for that, they notice that. In 2020, when the George Floyd protests happened, I offered my students, hey, I have space for you to come in. If you want an event, come and talk to me about it. I will be happy to sit down and talk to you. And one of my students came to my Zoom class and he goes, I'm just really worried about you. Do you have a gun to protect yourself? So just know that if we're not talking about these events in our classrooms and how it's impacting their mental health, they're noticing that too. And they're noticing, and that's also, impacting their mental health, just like it's impacting us.
Thank you, Sylvia, on that. It reminded me back in, the aftermath of September 11th. And, I was a 5th grade teacher in downtown Brooklyn. And the, New York City public school system at that time specifically told teachers to not, speak about the tragedy because it's going to bring up a lot of emotion and trauma. But without speaking about it, the kids were not able to focus. The kids were not able to do anything. And it was only after, a group of educators came together and developed the 9/11, curriculum project, where we all came together and started developing these lessons. And we shared them with one another and talked about this and provided the kids the space and the healing and to share what they were feeling, was when we finally got them to feel like, I'm safe and I know what is happening in the world and I can now learn. And it's so important that we create that space. And I thank you for actually bringing that up.
I actually do want to highlight one more thing. We saw what's happening, or we're seeing what's happening with Russia and Ukraine, and we saw a lot of communities come out in support of our Russian and Ukrainian students. And we saw that even with our school districts coming out with support. But at the end of the day, you have to remember that where was that support for our BIPOC students or our marginalized communities, right? We center white feelings and white students and white communities. When is it time to center our BIPOC communities or our most marginalized communities?
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that point. I also, before we go on to the next question, I wanted to let our viewers know we'll be taking your questions too. So please drop them in the chat for us. Lisa and Gia, how are you as teachers processing those headlines and the stressful stories that deserve even more attention? What do you do with that information? Lisa, can you kick us off?
Sure, thank you. Well, when they do have questions and they are encouraged, if there's something that's bothering them or something they're not quite clear about, to ask, to reach out for help, to try to understand. So most of all, they want to know, how does it affect them? How is it going to affect their families? And so we just, try to, nobody really knows what the outcome will be, the final outcome, but, it's just with the inflation, they see the inflation, it hits their families, and so just taking it one day at a time, and not all of them have questions about it or concerns about it, but the ones that do, we do our best to try to get an answer for them, find something for them.
Thank you. Gia?
So I think that, one thing that might be really lacking in our school systems is a community of support to create processes, kind of like restorative justice circles, where these spaces, like Sylvia described, spaces that have been part of the structure and the system of our schools, where it becomes just automatic, like tradition, routines, practice. We can do RJ circles around really hard topics that come up. And for example, like in my classroom, I teach 4th and 5th grade. Been teaching for about this is my 22nd year. I can't believe it. But having children talk about these things in a way where, they might put up a finger. I have an issue that I really want to bring to the community. Put up 2 fingers if there's an issue, but you're kind of hesitant to bring up to the community, and 3 if you're not quite sure yet, and it's okay if you don't have something. And then I ask for a volunteer to kick us off, and we have community norms during our circles, and students will often name things that are either happening within our school community or classroom community, but most often they bring up things that are happening outside. We do have a couple students in our class who are from Ukraine, immigrated families. They immediately connected to students from other countries who were facing war and had to leave. So sharing together and also extending that to the rest of our school community. Imagine if we had school spaces where this is just part of what we do to take care of each other. And I do think that knowing that there's solidarity, knowing that there's a space to discuss and process these things, and that not necessarily that there's a solution, but that then the next step might be, how can we organize together? What are the ways in which we can work together? Small, great, develop campaigns, start, joining campaigns and movements. We started a Black Lives Matter at Schools group, LGBTQ club for the students to create these spaces. I think the more we have that and we center the identities of our students and their experiences, the more empowered they can become and we become.
Thank you. That's such an important point that you make. And again, what we do when we do this is we give them a sense of comfort, right? We're providing them, with answers. We're helping them come up with answers to offer them that comfort level that they can feel like, okay, I'm going to be safe. My family is going to be safe, and I can do something about it, empowering them. Dania and Sylvia, we've heard reports of growing attacks on educational theory and practice. In some states, teachers are forbidden from even discussing certain topics. Help us see those events through your eyes. How do they impact your profession and the communities you serve? Dania, we'd love for you to kick us off.
Okay, so it is a really big debate right now, and I'm going to try to keep it within the discussion within the confines of my classroom. As an English teacher, for me, words are very powerful, right? And when I think of theories that challenge certain books that are taught in classrooms, it could be very disheartening for me as a teacher on quite a few levels. So I'll just speak first about what it means to not have students exposed to the texts that might be considered controversial. I think what it does is it prevents them from seeing the connectiveness of all humans and the struggles that we go through. It denies them a way to kind of look at the role that we play within ourselves in creating these experiences for others, whether we be the hero or the villain. And I think it interrupts their willingness to write, to share their own stories, because if they think that their voices are going to be silenced, that doesn't really motivate anyone to write. So as it pertains to the classroom, I think that the issue is not necessarily what texts per se kids are reading. Of course, we don't want anything to be too graphic for them because their maturity level matters. But I think it's the role of teachers to frame those conversations, and help kids to investigate the themes within those stories, more because they're going to read the books anyway. But when they read those books, we want them to actually get meaning from it, and meaning that will help them to change as people in order to change society.
Thank you. Sylvia, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this.
You know, the things that we're seeing across the nation, book bans or critical race theory, you know, these are all attacks on discussions of race, identity, gender, sexual orientation. It's anything that challenges the dominant perspective in America, we're going to ban it, right? This is about representation. Who is in our classroom? We should be able to, in our classroom, you know, it's about our students should be able to see themselves in our classroom, you know, whether you're Black or brown. We should be able to have these discussions around race, gender, you know, all these critical pieces for the development of students and how they see themselves and how they see the world. We need to, as educators, we should be developing counter narratives to those. We're allowing these few voices to dictate what happens in our classroom. As for legislators, you know, I know this is just to aim at educators, and we're continuing to being asked to, you know, defend their profession. What are you doing? What are you teaching? Right now, we saw, you know, in Florida, the AP Stats, that book that we use, they're not allowed to use it because it is a bias-free textbook, and it challenges their idea of race and critical race theory. So how do you bring these into your classroom, even from a math statistical point of view?
I want to add to something Sylvia just said, that textbook that they're not adopting, I think there's a series and they all incorporate social emotional learning, or SEL. And that helps us guide students through their emotions as they engage in complex or difficult tasks. And all students benefit from that, but students who experience trauma or poverty, they need that even more. So teaching without it, I think, from my perspective, that just perpetuates class differences or even increases it. If we really want to improve education, it's something we need to incorporate.
Absolutely. And, you know, as I'm listening to the three of you, you know, and the mention of textbooks, right? Like, our textbooks are actually created in the Bible Belt. And when I have looked through textbooks and seen some of the things that are written there, they do not reflect the narrative of the peoples that I, for example, come from. You know, I'm Yemeni American, Arab American. I also identify as Muslim. And, you know, years ago, you know, within the global studies textbooks, they would start about the history of Islam from its inception and then end the chapter with 9/11. Who was there to say, hold up, that's not where 9/11, you know, where Islam, you know, stops and or should be included as a part of that narrative. And I think this is something that that we struggle with as educators, is making sure that the materials that we are getting in our classrooms are reflective of the people that are sitting in our classrooms, the young people, the children. So really important. And I appreciate both, you know, all three of your comments on that. And this could be a topic all in of its own that we can certainly have and debate and bring other educators to discuss. Ben, Lisa, and Gia, if you were put in charge of the U.S. Department of Education, What's the first thing you would do to improve the mental health of teachers and students? Lisa, do you want to kick us off?
Okay, thank you. Well, let's see. I do believe the mental health part is a really important piece. We're a lot of the teachers right now. I know they are feeling burnout, and we have some teachers that are leaving the profession. Some are early, retiring early, and they're just not feeling supported. They're stressed, and so with that, if we could get I know that our district has tried to get more teachers hired. They're really reaching out. There's a $5,000 bonus for new hires. They had given us $1,000 for retention, but it's for us that are actually in there every day and subbing every day. It's really not enough. And it's not just about the money, it's about the time. And when you're subbing for someone else, you don't really have time to keep your own classroom ready to go. You know, you use that time subbing in somebody else's classroom that you normally use for your own, preparing for your own classes. So, and then if you have a family at home, you know, so it just comes down to they can't allow us more time. I mean, they can't give us more time during the day, but they could make it worthwhile. You know, the pay would be great, but also if they could give like some sort of support to us, you know, if they could say, hey, and I did say that our administration was stressed. Our administration in our building has come and did some subbing. They don't do it a lot, but they've done a few times. But if they could do that more frequently, if to kind of take some of that weight off, and mental health, there are mental health pieces out there that teachers are feeling stressed, and it would be nice to, in a safe place where you could talk about those things, and you know, with colleagues, and we do some of that, but there isn't a real safe place. So I think mental health would be, if there was somewhere for us to get to talk to someone else other than someone in our building, that would be good. The classroom sizes, they're just growing. Our classroom sizes are getting bigger. So those are some things that I would like to see changing.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Gia?
So if we were in charge, I say we, the collective we, educators on the ground, were in charge of the Department of Education, I think one of the first things that we should task ourselves with is to survey educators, and not just classroom teachers, but you know, all of the folks who work in our schools and support our students. I work with part of an organization called the Movement of Rank and File Educators, and our motto is our working conditions are our students' learning conditions. And so imagine if we like surveyed all of the educators on the top issues and things that we would need to create nurturing spaces for us and our students to be able to do our jobs. I think we would see things like greater autonomy in the workplace, greater resources, actually prioritizing students over the militarization, right? Military industrial complex, the amount of money that's spent. I think that organizing with our parents and students would be some of the first things we do to change things. and then we can get really specific. But I think that would be like the first thing, surveys.
Great. Ben?
I like a lot of these responses, but I don't think that at the federal level we can do some of them. So I think at the federal level, I would address housing and try and work with that, because redlining and things like that just are destructive to our communities, and schools are community centers. I'd increase Section 8 and other social safety net things. I would support states with changing their funding formulas. In California, that's where I am, our funding formula has changed dramatically over the last 20, 30 years. And still Californians think that it's property taxes. And communicating what's actually happening, I think, is also important. During the pandemic, at the federal level, we are providing food to all students. I think that was a federal level thing, and we should continue doing that. I think that we should continue to increase and polish IDEA funding. Maybe Gia could talk a bit more about that. That's, I think, so important. Canceling student debt, of course. At a state level, though, in California, something that I've been really concerned about is we have something called the College and Career Indicator, and it tells us how many students are ready for college or a career once they graduate from high school. And that metric, there's 8 paths to college and career readiness, and they're all really focused on academic achievement and really trying to push kids to go to college. And while I like the idea of everyone going to college, that's just not everyone's interest. I think really trying to continue to improve it, because California has really been trying to improve those metrics, but continuing to improve that to be a more equitable measure of if students are really ready for a career.
Thank you, Ben. You know, one point that you made, which, you know, some people might think, well, housing, how does housing fit into this? It certainly resonates for me as a New York educator. And, you know, right here in New York City, we have so many families that are living in shelters or temporary housing. And, you know, thinking back of the days when I was a teacher and having, you know, students who lived in shelters, just how they felt unsafe. There were so many emotions that they and their families are experiencing that it's very hard for our kids to learn. So in order for them to have a stable life, they have to have housing. And when they have that housing, then they can learn and they can thrive. And so it's a really important point that you made. And I love what Sophia put in the chat. She said a 4-day school week. I love that idea. And maybe even shortening the day a little bit, especially when we think about our high school students who have a really hard time waking up very early in the morning, right? Maybe having, their day start a little later. And, you know, there's been studies in Europe, you know, they've done some of these things to really accommodate young people.
So
Go ahead.
my school actually starts at 7:20 in the morning. So we got to be here at 6:45 in the morning. But last year when we did Zoom learning, it was really nice to have like classes. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday was professional development day. And it really gave us, opportunity for our teams, our PLCs to get together and plan, and we do common assessment with my algebra team. So it was really nice to be able to have a team and plan with them, collaborate with them. It also gave us time to catch up on emails, respond to parents, do one-on-one with students. So we were able to really spend intervention time with students. So that was really beneficial. And I'm now we're back to 5 days. I think another point that I want to add on to what Ben said, it was cancel standardized testing. We don't need those. We have educators for that, and we should be able to trust our educators with our students. And it's inequitable to hold students, all of them, to a same standard when we know the socioeconomic backgrounds that they come from and the historical policies of redlining that has played into that. So really, we should be canceling standardized testing and finding ways to fully and equitably fund the schools.
Thank you. Danae, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yes, thank you. Can I just say it's Dania? I know it's so hard.
Dania, I apologize.
Don't worry about it. I just wanted everyone to have the proper pronunciation, just in case they wanted to say it. So I was thinking about the question in terms of changes, right? And when I think of teachers and what they're currently kind of upset about, right? It's this idea of autonomy. It almost feels as if we're not trusted to be able to do the job. And so there's a lot of micromanaging and a lot of this belief that, oh, we want to see everything across the board. And what that really does is it ties our hands a little bit into how responsive we can be with our teaching methods, because all of our kids are not the same. So even the most brilliantly written lesson plan, just because you have it there for your administrator doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be useful in the exact moment of response to your students. And when we think about students, I think they've been cooped up at home for a year and a half. So there should be some thought put into, making the city that you're in kind of like your playground, right? Like time to start going outside and building that cultural capital. Those things that come up in conversations all the time, the things that, they're not just about reading and writing, but it's about being able to go out into public and interact with other people. So I think those are two things that I would like to see more of within the school system.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. And, interestingly enough, someone put out a message for us. It said, I went to an arts high school where I only had academic classes 4 days a week. Wednesday was just for arts classes. It was amazing. Definitely. These are things we could truly aspire to and also organize around to make a reality. We have another message from Facebook. On a federal level, I'd ensure all families in Title I schools can afford mental health care. Our school counselors do a great job of identifying students in need of support. The families need to be able to get professional mental help. Sadly, certain communities are not valued, impoverished, or also our children. So thank you for all of those who are commenting, and please, send us your questions as well. We are now up to our lightning rod. So I'm really excited, and we want to make sure that all of you get the opportunity. Everyone, how do you keep focus when facing an impossible situation? How do you maintain grace under pressure? So, Dania, would you like to start us off?
Grace under pressure, how do you maintain that? I think, first of all, it's about understanding that everyone is feeling some level of pressure, and pressure is not unique to anyone. I think when you understand that this is a shared struggle called life, and each, you can't escape it. The part about being graceful, though, is believing in that you can make it through the difficulties and the challenges. And because everyone else is going through a difficult time, you're able to exercise grace to them, and just be a kinder person, right? Because everyone right now needs a little bit extra love in order to get by. So if you can just think about it in that way, I think the pressure won't seem as if it's only on you. It's like we're all carrying a part of the burden. And if we could just be nice to each other, I think that's how I maintain it.
Awesome. Who'd like to go next? Gia?
Sure, I'll go next. I take lots of deep breaths, and I invite, my students and my colleagues to do the same whenever we can. One of the things is to really work hard at creating life balance. There's, I don't know if it's unspoken, but often educators, we martyr ourselves to the work, to our, and we have to remind ourselves, and it's hard for me, but I have to remind myself to take care of myself and to let others take care of me as well, as I'm helping to take care of them. And also organizing to empower, organizing around issues to change things and develop strategies together. I think that's what's really been a guiding light and provided a great hope for the future.
Oh my gosh. You know, when you said self-care, that is one thing that we are all guilty of doing. We preach it, but we don't practice it. And it's so important that we do, because once we burn out, then we're useless to everyone and anyone around us. So thank you for bringing that point up. I want to share a question from YouTube. What can the general public do to support and show love to our outspoken educators, specifically in the face of white supremacy and censorship? Anybody want to take a stab at that?
I'd like to ask you to repeat the question, please.
Sure. What can the general public do to support and show love to our outspoken educators, specifically in the face of white supremacy and censorship?
I can take a stab at it. Or sorry, go ahead, Gia.
No, you go first. You go first.
Okay. To organize. Organize with your peers, organize with your allies, find out who your allies are. If you don't know who your allies are, engage in a conversation with them, whether that's on social media or go out with coffee. Don't rely on educators to do all the work. Engage in PTA or PTOs on all of those acronyms. Go to school board meetings and support us. Find a way that you can be involved in the community or within the school. Really, that is how we're going to how we're going to tackle these things, or even run for school board.
I was going to add. I wanted to echo a lot of that, but also add that pay attention to our budgets. Right, our elected officials are put into office, and then often once we get them there, there's not a whole lot of energy behind holding them to making the decisions around our school budgets, prioritizing resources to our schools. We talked about federal funding. At the federal level, the U.S. Department of Education, the education secretary is appointed by the president. And then a lot of the decisions then get made very top down. And this happens all throughout our nation, decisions made centrally and then top down. So as part of our community, as part of being taxpayers, I think it's really important to know how the monies are being spent, where they're being prioritized, and to work with your local school board, like Subia's mentioned, and think about, ask questions. Where do we need this money prioritized? Mental health, supporting students with arts and physical education, libraries, all of those things have been cut in many places.
Great. And I would add one thing to that question, is one way that you can show love and support is stand in solidarity with educators who are under fire. Making sure that you form a coalition, you bring like-minded people, and you do letter campaign writing on their behalf. You come out and support them, hold a rally, hold whatever, a visual, whatever it is, to show them that you appreciate the stand that they are taking and the work that they are doing. We have some questions that are coming in, but I want to do one more bonus lightning rod, and then we're going to go right into the Q&A with our audience. Viewers who care about the well-being of teachers, students, and K through 12 education, what can they do now to make a difference? Ben, you want to kick us off?
I think some of the last responses covered some of that. Be vocal. Voices that we're hearing are, many of them don't even have children in education. I think that just came out. So much of the negativity is not in the realm of the school. So in fact, that there was a recent NPR study that I think it was over 80% of parents of children are happy with what's happening at school. So being vocal, I think, is a huge thing. That kind of goes back to the question earlier about white supremacy. I think at the macro level, some others respond to that, but it happens. It's a normalized thing. Racism is it's normal. I think that's why it's hard to deal with. So when you see it, just kind of addressing it. I think it needs to be addressed in a kind way, because I think some of us don't even realize that we're doing that. But yeah, I guess that's where I'd start.
Great. Lisa?
Okay, so what was the question again?
Sure. It was a lightning ride. Viewers who care about the well-being of teachers, students, and K through 12 education, what can they do to make a difference?
Well, I do believe that teaching really starts at home. If you really want to support your teachers, it starts at home. And with the reading, with writing, just spending a little bit of time with your child at home, teaching them to be good citizens, teaching them to be good people, and that, because when we have to talk with your student or take them aside, that takes time away from the learning. So and then communicating with you afterwards about what happened. So I do believe that if they really want to support us, it's just talking with your student at home about what the expectations are.
Absolutely. Thank you. We're going to now transition to some of the questions that we have in the chat from our viewers. From YouTube, what would you tell a loved one thinking of entering the field of education today?
I'll start with that. I'd say to do it. I think it's still a noble profession in my eyes. I think it's the best way to kind of leave a legacy. I teach about 110 kids a day, and I probably come in contact with 200. And I feel like every day I get to plant another seed. And when I see them years later, it's amazing. And to just feel like I've made a difference and to know that I'm impacting the future is very rewarding in itself. And I'd say do it. Go for it.
Awesome. Anyone else want to chime in? Well, there's another question, and this question is, what attracted you to become a teacher, and what keeps you in this profession?
Oh, I'll take that one.
Go ahead, Lisa.
Okay, so what attracted me to be a teacher is I guess it was, for me, it was family. I wanted to be where my children were. I wanted to be on the same schedule as my children. I was always looking for daycare during the summer months. I didn't feel like I had enough time for my children. And I realized what I gave up to become a teacher. I was income, but that is, I did have 2 jobs, but what I got in return was family time. And for me, there's nothing more important than that.
Thank you. Ben, this question is for you. Someone on Facebook said, I've enjoyed Ben's perspective on most questions. Wondering his opinion about trade lifestyle occupations instead of pushing college pathway careers.
That's a big one. I think it's absolutely necessary. I think that there's some pitfalls. If we teach a skill that's a specialized skill for a certain technology or certain industry, if that industry is gone, then we haven't really done a great service to the student. But at the same time, I think that if we partner with industries more, that it can be a really big benefit to many, many students. In California, we used to have, I guess it's still ROP, but the program is called CTE. It's Career and Technical Education, and that is one of the pathways to that college and career indicator that I had mentioned earlier. But part of that pathway still includes passing on the state exams on a high stakes test. So I think that it just needs to be continually refined and polished to serve our students.
I think we just need to stop pushing on the idea that, hey, you have to go to college. Also remembering that, you know, it was the American dream and it was catered to white folks, particularly white males, right? We're going to grow up, we're going to go to school, you're going to do a K to 12, go to college, and you're going to get a job. And, you know, now in this day and age, it's actually not necessarily true. We've seen people who've gone through college and, you know, they're struggling to find jobs. And we've seen people who are doing, you know, carrying on their family businesses and doing a great job with, you know, they're successful in what they do, or they love doing that. And especially in the last 2 years, we've seen an increase of entrepreneurship. We've seen people start their own businesses from home. So really, we need to stop pushing the idea of, hey, you have to go to college. Sure, it's one of the pathways. And I will encourage my students to go to college because the job industry is so demanding and competitive. But I will never force a kid to be like, hey, you have to apply for a 4-year. And I will always respect my students, and especially if there's a career or a trade skill that they would like to learn, and go a different route.
Thank you, Sylvia, for that. We have a question from Facebook. The question is, how can schools who serve diverse communities promote SEL, which is social emotional learning? How can we make it equitable for all students present and not just native English speakers? Who would like to take a stab at that?
I'm just thinking. I don't think I have a perfect answer, but I think what I find with SEL is teachers are now being asked to basically become counselors, and teaching SEL is not just a matter of do this fun activity and talk about your emotions or breathe deeply. I think there needs to be a lot more focus on actually developing the capacity of teachers to do this, instead of just expecting them to do it on the fly. And so teachers don't always know how to address the diverse communities because they're not always aware of the different cultural functionings within that particular set of kids. So I want to say that there has to be a more fine tuning of what we mean when we say SEL and what that actually looks like day to day in the classroom. Because just because someone's a teacher or they could read a strategy, it doesn't mean that they have the emotional capacity or they're not dealing with their own things in order to teach that to students or to help students to deal with their own issues. And that is one of the things I think we're dealing with that's not working in terms of SEL.
I agree with Dania 100%. I think that we have a lot of the tools already, but at least in my teacher training programs, we talk about like cognitive rigor and like how deeply is a student going to understand things, but we don't talk about the emotional kind of thing that they're going through as they do it. And Bloom's taxonomy included the affective domain in addition to like the cognitive domain, and we never discussed that. As teachers, I just think that we're underprepared for that because there's been such a focus on all that standardized testing and things like that.
Can I just add really quick
Of course.
to what folks are saying? Really, what are we preparing our students for, right? Are we preparing them to get toughened up, but then like mentally okay to do to work with the conditions that our society is pretty much setting up for them? Or are we working to try to make conditions in our schools, the learning conditions, and they're living their life better and more equitable out in society? And so how should schools mirror that? So I think it's SEL not just to soften you or to help you cope better, like others, I feel like we're all saying kind of the same things. But how do we really empower each other to make things better so that it's
Absolutely.
tenable? Yeah.
Absolutely. One of the commenters on YouTube said, Lisa is absolutely correct. It all starts at home. Another commenter wrote, in addition, the parents have every right to know what their children are being taught. School curriculum should be published and available to parents at the start of the school year. Absolutely. I think these are, essential things that are being brought up and very pertinent for all of us to think about and consider. So we have come to the end of our session. This has been really wonderful. I want to appreciate all of you. Sylvia, if I have not pronounced your name correctly, please forgive me. Dania, if I have not pronounced it, please forgive me. And I just want to thank you all. It's been such a pleasure, hearing your thoughts, your ideas, and everything that you've shared. So much food for thought for me, for all of us that are tuning in. I wish you all the best in what you are doing. Keep up the great, incredible work that you are doing. Our children need you. They need dedicated people like you who care about them and who continue to be dedicated in this profession. It is a thankless profession, but know that we all appreciate you. It was a pleasure to meet all of you. Thank you.
Could
Thank
I
you.
just add in a comment? Earlier, you asked about how did we get into teaching. I actually wanted to be a teacher ever since I was a little kid, and I used to have like my own pretend classroom and teach. And now I'm 7 years into this, and fighting for students and advocating, and it's been tough. And so earlier, when you asked about what would you tell someone who would go into this field today, just know that if you're going to come and advocate for your students every day, this is going to be tough, and you're going to need to find allies who will work with you and who are willing to stand in this fight with you. And it's going to be exhausting, and it's going to drain you at times. But at the end of the day, your students are going to make it worth it.
Absolutely. Brian, back to you. You're muted, Brian.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I'm tempted to leave it with you. You guys are covering so much ground, and it's wonderful to hear these frontline perspectives and conversations around these issues. Really, really important stuff. And I can't tell you how much we appreciate that you've gathered from all of these cities across the country to talk to us about what mental health looks like from your perspective and in your schools and communities. Really, really appreciate it. So thank you so much, Dr. Debbie, and thank you, panel. It's been a delight. And thank you, Paul Rucker, for that very moving performance at the top of the evening. I want to again thank our promotional partners, the Asian American Federation and the National Alliance of Mental Illness of New York City. They're both doing incredible work, and we're thankful for their promotional support. On behalf of everyone here at the WNET Group, a big thanks to all of you for joining us tonight. We hope you will return next Thursday, 6 p.m. Eastern, for Taking Time to Breathe, a conversation with mental health providers about mental health. And it's another phenomenal group of people that are coming together for that. You can learn more about that panel at 13.org/Grace Under Pressure. And you will also find a link. You can watch last week's panel with the healthcare workers, Eye of the Storm. Thank you, everyone. Take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and we will see you very soon. Good night.